morning. Thank you so much for choosing Citizen TV on this 31st day of October 2023. And it's an important day. Like I told you, King of England is in Nairobi. He arrived last night alongside Queen Camilla. They should be starting the official visit at the State House this morning to witness, or rather they'll be inspecting the Guard of Honor. And of course, start of the day, some 4-day activities that will also culminate in a visit to Mombasa, meeting different groups. And we got an invite last evening from the First Lady of Kenya this time, saying that she'll be having a meeting with Queen Camilla on women empowerment. Of course, we'll be bringing you that on Citizen TV. Before we get into the deeper conversation about that, I want to take a look at the top stories on the Standard and the Daily Nation. Again, it's the continuation of the KCPE, being day 2 of that. And of course, what we know is coming to the end of an era for the 844 system. And at the same time, we know the question of KPSEA, the second time that it is being sat. Remember last year, the first sort of exam was sat. It was for grade 6 that time. There was confusion, but now it's clear that it is not for placement. Instead, it is for talking about giving feedback to the stakeholders on assessing how the system is faring, but also how the learners themselves are faring. And KCSE should begin next week on Monday. There has been some papers going on, especially the practicals, but the KCSE proper should begin next week on Monday. Then again, if you look at the papers on the Daily Nation, it's the Kenya's top counties. A majority of the top 10 they come from the Rift Valley: Uasin Gishu, Elgeyo Marakwet, Trans Nzoia, Kericho, Nandi, Bomet, West Pokot, reporting more than 54%. This is based on a performance index conducted by Infotrack, and talking about how that is going. But then again, there are several counties that have reported less than 50%, starting with Meru, going all the way to the rest of the country. And you see a lot of images even there on the conduct of the final examinations. But also it has been an important week that Kenyans have been speaking about what's going on in the country, in the sector, specifically to do with the economy. The Kenyan shilling not doing so well, but also concerns of people saying that the president has been quite on a tour. And this week, last week, he spoke and said that what he's doing is part of his job. I have Brian Olang from KHRC. Good morning.
Good morning, Tom. How are you?
Good to see you. I'm all right. And I have Nelson Kwech, who's the chairperson of the Foreign Relations, Defense and Intelligence. I choose to start with Foreign Relations because of the day. He's the chairperson of that committee at the National Assembly, and they're here to talk about the royal visit. But also, let's start quickly, talk about what has been happening, because again, the president, there are several clips that are now going around saying that he's close to 40 tours since he came into the office, and he defended that on Sunday. When you look at it and the much expenditure that this comes, not just on the president, but also on other state officers and public officers, what would you say is the justification if you had to look at what Kenya is gaining? Are we at a point that you're able to substantiate and say this is the much we have achieved from those tours?
Thank you, Sam. I'm happy you've asked this as a first question, because President William Ruto, any president who is elected, any serious president immediately after taking office, has to cement the diplomatic relationship with different countries. The president is not traveling for fun. It's actually not enjoyable to visit all these countries. He's doing it because there is an urgent need to resource this country, and speaking to investors and different countries and nations to make sure that we tap into some of the resources that are urgently needed in this country, particularly from those countries that have largely, predominantly supported Kenya. The president has been to the US, the president has been to Germany, the president has been to Belgium, recently he was in Russia. But allow me just quickly to enumerate some of the gains that we've achieved with these travels. And number one, when we first were elected to government, the president has traveled to, the first country was USA. That was the General Assembly. There were bilateral talks that happened there. in the UN General Assembly. Then he came and went to Ethiopia. Ethiopia, this was when he was launching, there was a launch of the subsidiary of Safaricom in Ethiopia. That is a huge, huge investment and an employment opportunity for Kenyans. There was in Egypt, and then in Egypt, that was a UN climate change bilateral talks. And you remember in Egypt is where we got, he signed the $5 billion investment by the UK Prime Minister, Mr. Rishi, if you do remember. The president again went to Congo. Let me even skip Congo and Eritrea and go straight to the US, where the president was hosted by the President Joe Biden, and he held talks. And here is where we had the Rockefeller Foundation discussion and collaboration of green energy in Kenya. That is a huge, huge achievement. Then he went to France. You know, in France, this is where he held talks with Macron, President Macron. And here it was infrastructure projects. Part of it was the discussion of the Mau Summit, Rironi, all the way to Nakuru, dual carriage. I will skip African countries, Senegal, Burundi, even though they were significant as well. And I go straight to Germany. In Germany, the president was a keynote speaker on the 9th Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue. And then he went to Belgium. This was a state visit, and they also held bilateral talks with the Prime Minister Alexander De Croo, where they discussed health, food, and security. And then I will go straight again to Netherlands. In Netherlands, he did the Global Center on Adaptation, and this was in Notre Dame, in Strategic Dialogue on African Summit. Israel, they held bilateral talks with Israel Prime Minister and signed various agreements in cooperation, agriculture, trade, education, and security. South Africa, this was third Pan-African Parliamentary Summit on climate and equity. So I'm just enumerating this so you tell me where you thought that the president should not have visited. And then, of course, he went to Comoros, came to China. The latest was Tanzania. From Tanzania again to the USA. And then, so that I just sum it up, China. In China, this was very interesting because we had critics had actually thought that the president had been leaning towards the West. But in China, he had a serious engagement. He signed an MOU with Chinese on telecommunication company Huawei to expedite Kenya's digital transformation. That was extremely important. There was discussion on infrastructure. If you saw Honorable Kipchumba Murkomen's tweet, he highlighted on areas discussed. First, one was a request of $1.5 billion for infrastructural development and even settling of certain loans, not certain loans, certain debts that are owed to contractors. That will be a game changer. There were issues of...
So a request, did it transition to an offer?
I don't know. That is now a discussion with Treasury. But this is what, I'm just saying what I saw from Murkomen's tweet.
Right, I hear you, Honorable Koech, and I mean, this is good information, but the essence of what I'm asking is, we don't see this translating into either action or even being reflected in the budget of the country.
But honestly, Sam, these things have just been, these are things that have just been done in the last...
Those trips you're talking about have been over a year ago,
yes.
Some of them.
Every trip is very useful. Look at how many trips Ramaphosa made in his first 7 months of presidency. He did more than 42 trips.
Let's talk about the president of Kenya.
Yes.
So how do we see this translating into an impact that is being felt in the country?
I have enumerated what we've achieved as a country. I have even said, in terms of figures, how much the president has the bilateral, multilateral that the president has signed.
Like Egypt, you spoke about, is it 5 billion?
5 billion that was signed by the UK Prime Minister. Yes.
So where is that money?
It should be around.
What is
it should be coming. You don't sign and you get it the next day. These are their procedures.
When was that signing?
I don't remember exactly, but if you allow me, I can look on my phone. This happened in... So ordinarily, when these are signed, then of course there are procedures again that come with agreeing and dispersing the funds. This one, and most of it are donations and funding. Some of them are loans, some of them are funding directly without necessarily being a loan. The one for Egypt was done in 2022.
2022. I mean, that's what I'm asking. And I'm not saying it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I'm just asking, so where is it? How can we trace it?
No, but I just needed to enumerate, first of all, where we are and the successes that the president achieved in this travel. I just wanted, first of all, to allay the fear that the president could just be joyriding and enjoying the trips outside this country.
The beauty of it is that we haven't said that he's joyriding here.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Because Brian, tell me, what are your thoughts about these trips and what they mean? Are Kenyans being excessively oversensitive, or are those questions valid?
Those are very valid questions because, number one, I think now the president has taken around 38 trips since he came into office. And I think what my colleague here is speaking about are pledges. When you go to the ground, these things, we don't see the things he's talking about here. That is why Kenyans are complaining. For the president to take 38 trips, and this doesn't resonate with the common mwananchi because the cost of living is still high. We are still highly taxed. I think if you're driving today, the cost of fuel, or what you used to fuel, the amount of money you used to fuel your car with last year compared to this year, I mean, the difference is quite big. So because of these reasons, that is why Kenyans are complaining. Why is the president traveling a lot and we are not seeing the benefits of this travel? One of the reasons why I think he mentioned that he travels is job creation for the youth or job creation for Kenyans. We are not seeing these jobs. So these are just pledges. These are just, they're just pledges. And we don't see any benefit of these trips at all to the common mwananchi.
Honorable Koech, the counties spent 2.13 billion shillings on foreign travel, 2020 to 2023. The national government spent over 6 billion. Well, the Office of the President spent more than 360 million shillings the same period on foreign travel. So if you're to do that, it comes to nearly 9 billion shillings on foreign travel. And it's not to say that it shouldn't happen. But also, when you look at Parliament, you do that a lot because up to 9 billion shillings was spent by Parliament on travel, that is both domestic and foreign. So how then do we see value in this beyond the allowances, which is next to personal benefit? How do you see value in all these things?
It's wastage, pure wastage, if you call it. I'm one person who's totally been against travel and using government money to travel. It is expensive. It's not tenable. I mean, for instance, I was seeing recently a county that was traveling to Ghana, another one was traveling to Uganda, to go and benchmark on anti-corruption crusade of visiting an anti-corruption commission of Uganda or Ghana, for that matter. It is pure wastage. It is something that we must, as a country, consider. Counties continue to gobble so much money in an unnecessary travels and the guise of benchmarking. Same thing happened. I mean, across the executive, the judiciary, and even in Parliament. Right. And it is high time, and the president has spoken about it very unequivocally, that this should stop. Some, like you rightly indicated, there is so much money that is wasted on these travels. If I may just ask, what is it that we've gained from these travels, from delegations that have traveled out of the country? We are in a digital era. Anything that you need today, you don't have to go and benchmark outside. Why do people do exams online, study online, awarded degrees online, but you still find the appetite to travel out of the country to go and benchmark? You can benchmark online as well. So those are things that...
Tell me, Nelson, Coach, because you're so eloquent on that, yes, and you chair the Foreign Relations Committee. I presume that beyond implementation of budget, this also comes to your committee. So what shall we do so that we reduce this unnecessary expenditure?
Because sometimes it's difficult to really rein in. These are two distinct bodies, executive, judiciary, and parliament, are distinct arms of a government, and the president will be seen, or any other executive, or for instance, the executive will be seen to overstretching their mandate if they, for instance, had to step in and ask that parliament reduces their travel. The only way to do that is to quietly ask the immigration office to deny whether it's the executive or the judiciary or members of parliament who are traveling, the opportunity to travel when it doesn't make sense to travel.
Let's listen to the president speaking about this particular matter on when he spoke about reducing the expenditure but also defending the travels that he's been making.
Kuna watu wengine wananipigia makelele, mbona umeenda safari hii, mbona umeenda safari hii. Hiyo ndio kazi yangu ya rais. Mimi ndio chief agent ya Kenya. Mimi ndio ambassador ya Kenya ya kupanga vile Kenya itasonga mbele. Nimepunguza ile pesa ya watu kurandaranda na kuzunguka. Niliona jana watu wa magazeti wanasema nimepunguza milioni 500. Hapana, si milioni 500. Nimepunguza bilioni 11.
All right, and joining us now is the Senator of Narok County, that is Leda Molekina. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Why the sabbatical? What's going on?
Why? I mean, you know, it's always good to chill and think and reflect about the future. If everything is going down south, then you sit down, reflect, and you plan for a better future.
Right.
That's exactly what I was doing.
So tell me, we are talking about the many travels and the expensive expenditure that we continue to see. And including over the weekend, there's a senior member of parliament who was saying that actually even when parliamentarians are traveling out of the country, they pass by his office and leave him something. We're still trying to find the original clip of that. But what are your thoughts about the foreign agenda of the country and the many travels at a time that the country continues to struggle with domestic issues? What would you say?
I think there are three things to consider here. One, we have three arms of government. And each arm of government has got its own well-thought-out budget. And it is wrong, and really it would be setting a very bad precedent if one arm of government is seen to be controlling the other two arms of government. I take, with great exceptions, the words of the president saying that he will reduce the budget of every government officials, which include even the parliamentary and the judiciary. I think the neater thing to do is that at the National Assembly, when they are formulating the budgets, they need to seriously consider. You see, if you look at county governments as an example, they have what we call CIDP. They plan for 5 years. You know, we cannot just have this knee-jerk reaction to a situation. Right. You've already planned for it, you've negotiated it, you've passed the budget. And budgets, as my colleagues will tell you, are things which are negotiated. So at the inception stage, think through. Ask yourself, are these trips necessary? And to be honest with you, some of those trips are very necessary. You know, they form relations. Today we are here to talk about the visit of King Charles to this country. They form relations. And sometimes we see opportunities. And in most cases, it is better to discuss issues face to face. Of course, I don't support just unnecessary travels that do not contribute to this economy. But sometimes traveling across the world to be able to learn different things and actually coming back and implementing them. You know, I think what we should be asking ourselves is that, what is a budget? Is it reasonable? Does each arm of government does it have its own team that can be able to formulate a budget that can be able to support? And then from there, we have a much sober conversation. But saying that quietly you tell the immigration officers to stop, to deny other arms of government from traveling, or even public officers from traveling, will actually be draconian laws. I think the best thing to do is to have a much sober discussion, agree, and see whether that budget is necessary. If it is not necessary, then you move. In fact, we always have, you know, supplementary budgets. You know, instead of just being seen as being dictatorial, The best way to approach something is to say, we had budgeted to spend X amount of money within local travels.
Right.
As my colleague will tell you, most cases, the travels which are exhausted are foreign travels. But every year, Parliament or parliamentary committees have a lot of money which is left from local travels. So they have to think and say, can we carry out a supplementary budget? Can we borrow from this line item to this other line item? I think we can do it in a neater way instead of creating a huge hullabaloo about travels. Sometimes they are necessary. Sometimes there are deals that cannot be discussed digitally because of the security. Sometimes it is important to meet face to face and we discuss. You know, we cannot be dealing with issues as if we are only in the 21st century. We also have to consider that for us to be able to succeed in this world, we must walk with one foot in the modern culture and one foot in the traditional culture. If you talk about the Japanese, they prefer to meet face to face. You know, presidents talk on phone. You know, the current occupier of State House travels across the globe. If you ask him in his wisdom, he is making his relations. He's trying to meet these people and try to negotiate for things. Some of us think it's a waste, but he has his own budget. So we cannot be, let me just finalize by saying, it cannot be a knee-jerk reaction. It has to be something that they're not just traveling out of, they're not just pulling money from anywhere. They have budgeted for those travels. So the first place to correct it is at the budgeting stage.
But then again, Senator, even in those travels, I don't know if you remember the time that the former president traveled to the US to meet the then President Trump. And the announcement was that there was going to be improvement of the infrastructure between Mombasa and Nairobi. What was the road supposed to be? Was it a toll road or something like that?
Yes.
To date, that hasn't progressed. So where is accountability, especially of those deals that are signed, including earlier on he was explaining the signing between Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and the President, but you're not able to trace the arrival of whatever was signed at that time.
There's always something called the cost of doing business. If you travel, you go to the US, you discuss about the cost of building that road. If you leave that country, you go to the UK, you discuss with them. You know, it is like procurement. When you're procuring for any service, you request for three quotations so that you are able to compare apples to apples. Is it cheaper doing it this way or is it cheaper doing it this way? At the same time, they were discussing about the French building another road, I think the Mau Mau Road. You know, so really, there's got nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with people looking at things and saying, okay, let's negotiate. Deals are discussed for a very long time before you actually sign a deal. You know, some people travel back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You see all these talks on climate change. Sometimes people, like some of us, are critics and we say they are talks about nothing. But to a great extent, they do impact society in a way. Because when you travel, you bring in business. So I think we just have to be reasonable. We don't need to criticize everything when it comes to the issue of traveling. We need to ask ourselves serious questions. Is it necessary?
Okay. And
when we travel, the Maasai says, once you leave your environment and you go to a new area, you become wiser. So I don't think there's something wrong with that.
Okay, all right. And of course, so much more going on, including the details of the county travel. Several county assemblies travel to different countries, including Arusha for benchmarking when it comes to legislation. That's on record by the Control of Budget. We continue to monitor that. We're taking a short break here, but when we come back, we'll speak about the visit of King Charles III and Queen Camilla after the break.